Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Risto from Risto Sews, and today I'm going to show you a little bit about the parts of the sewing machine, and I'm going to explain their functions. Be sure to like and subscribe. This is the Bernina 1008 sewing machine that we use, and I'm going to just walk through the parts and their functions. So we'll start on the side of the machine. Over here you can see the on-off switch. If you turn the dial up, you'll see the light turns on, machine is on, and if you turn the dial down, it's off. This is called the hand wheel, and its function is to raise and lower the needle by hand, and it also raises the take-up lever up and down, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this is the hand wheel. This is where the foot pedal plugs in, and this normally goes on the ground, and this is how we control the machine when we sew electronically rather than using the hand wheel. So if you push it, it will make the machine go, but usually it's on the floor, like I said, and we'll use the hand wheel just if we want to raise or lower the needle manually. This first top piece up here is called the spool pin. Some machines have one or two, and this is where the thread will go for sewing. Below that, in front of it, is the bobbin winder, and we'll learn more about this tool in our next video when I show you how to wind the bobbin. But your bobbin, another tool, another part of the machine, will go on that when you wish to wind it. Moving downward, this dial up here is our stitch width regulator. So this allows us to sew at a zigzag. If you sew at a 0, you're going to be doing a straight stitch, and then the further over you go, we'll let you go in a zigzag pattern. This inner dial is called our needle position lever or dial. You can move it, and by moving it, it actually moves your needle positioning, which can be helpful in some sewing. This dial in the middle is for making buttonholes like you see on a shirt or pair of shorts, and it spins around, and each number allows it to do a different part of the buttonhole. We generally don't use it for beginning sewing. It's something we learn later on, but that is our buttonhole dial. Down below here, we have another multifunction part of the machine. By spinning this upward, you're making your stitches shorter. As you can see here, it kind of shows you they're shorter. And then by going down here, you have longer stitches. We like to keep it in the middle, about 2.5 for our length most of the time. The second function of this machine part is to back stitch. So by holding this upward, when you sew, you're actually going to be sewing backwards, which is really important to do in the beginning and end of every line of stitching to secure a knot. Finally, the last machine part in this row is two different functions we don't use that often. You'll see right here, this is a zigzag or straight stitch. It's where we want to keep the dial pretty much at all times. If you turn it this way, you'll see this kind of grid pattern. That will lower our feed dogs, which usually you don't want to do. So for our purposes, we keep it over here. You also see the green or the red. This correlates with this up here at the top of your machine. And you'll see if I have it on green, I'm selecting from these stitches. Our most common is stitch 1 or 2, the straight or zigzag. However, if I wanted to, I could move this and do different stitches here. And then if I wanted to be stitching from this list over here, I would turn it to the red at the bottom. On the left side of the machine, we have a number of other important parts. These are right here are called thread guides, and when we thread the machine, which we will do in our next video, you see how the thread goes around and is anchored on these different thread guides. You also have this tension disc or thread guide that's used when we wind the bobbin. So bobbin winder over here, this is used for when we wind the bobbin. This, as I mentioned earlier, is called a take-up lever, and you see it go up and down when you either manually turn the hand wheel or push the foot pedal. And that, again, is a thread guide that helps our tension when we're sewing. Down below, we have, of course, the needle, which you need to sew, and the presser foot. There are different presser feet that can go on the sewing machine, but this is the standard one that we use in most cases. Behind the presser foot is the presser foot lever, and by lowering the lever, you lower the presser foot. You always want to have the presser foot down when you're sewing and raised when you're not. It holds the fabric against this thing. This is called our throat plate. Kind of a funny name, but it holds the fabric down with the presser foot. It also has some measurements on it that help us to sew at a specific increment or seam allowance that we're going to learn about very soon. If you open this door down here, this is where the bobbin and bobbin case are placed. The bobbin, as I mentioned before, once it's wound, it's kind of like a mini spool of thread. Once it's wound, goes into the bobbin case, and you fish it through so it's threaded correctly, and then it actually goes into this area down below, and then this door is closed when you're sewing. So the bobbin works together to sew with the top thread. So the bobbin is the bottom thread, and the spool of thread up here is the top thread, and they work together to form your stitches. A tension wheel or tension disc, and what you want in most cases is for these two red lines to align. However, you could make your tension looser or tighter depending on what you're sewing. So there you have it, the machine parts and their functions of the Bernina 1008.